As I said, I will be guiding you through topic EC1, which is a topic which will be funded in tandem with EC2 on energy poverty. So this topic focuses on the role of consumers in changing the market through informed decisions and collective actions. This topic was first funded in 2018 with a different focus, which was on replacing inefficient appliances. And it is currently open. The deadline is the 3rd of September of this year, 2019. And what I will be presenting you today is basically the topic for next year, for 2020, which basically will have exactly the same text of this year. So the scope here is basically on collective actions and integration of renewables. So first, it is a CSA, it is a coordination and support action, meaning 100% is the co-funding rate. We expect a EU contribution of 1 to 2 million euros. The opening is the 5th of March 2020. The deadline will be the 10th of September 2020. What is the budget available for this one? Well, this topic, as I said, will be joined with EC2, which is the one that will be presented after me. And for the two topics together, we have allocated a funding of 12 million euros. So what is the challenge we're trying to address with this topic? We heard in the presentation of the, of the policy context that one of the visions of the clean energy for all is basically that consumers are better informed, that are protected, empowered, that individuals and communities should be entitled to generate electricity, consume, store, sell back to the market. Well, we believe that the precondition for this to happen is that citizens are, first of all, informed about the opportunities that would derive from them having an active role and engagement into the market. So that's the very first challenge to address. And another belief that we have is that one of the potentials for them to better do this is through collective action. So this topic is based on the assumption that consumers behave differently collectively than individually. And it would be this collective action, the collective behavior would be much more beneficial for them. So that is why basically we're looking for collective action, so that this would also enable them to have a critical mass to operate on the market, to increase the uptake of energy efficiency and have a higher active demand for services. However, as you can, of course, guess, since this is a very innovative concept, it's also a very recent piece of legislation. Of course, there are several barriers, the main ones being the regulatory barriers, because, of course, what the EU legislation sets is a framework, and then, of course, the local specificities might have different challenges. And that's what we're looking to address. So what is the scope of the topic? To set up and or support energy communities. We heard from Margot, there are a number of, well, definitions from a regulatory point of view about what an energy community is. There is the renewable energy community in Article 22 of the Renewable Energy Directive, or the citizens' energy community, which is reference to the Electricity Market Design Directive in Article 16. What we're looking here actually is a broader concept, a broader definition. So we're open to a concept of energy communities, which is as broad as an independent aggregator, which under the current piece of legislation should be granted a free non-discriminatory access to the market. Now, the most practical examples of this could be cooperatives, collective purchase groups, made up of SMEs, micro companies, local authorities, citizens. So this is entirely up to your creativity. Perhaps one word on setup and or support. To set up an energy community, of course, is very ambitious. So this means basically you would be tackling a region or a country where the energy community does not exist. However, our advice is basically to build on existing initiatives, because of course the project, or a project of 3 years, I mean, wouldn't be able to actually enable you to have, for example, a cooperative setup and running by the end of the project. So here, basically, the setup means also tackling member states where this concept is absent, and you basically bring practices from elsewhere where this concept is already existing, and you support this existing community to actually continue its activity. So what should these energy communities do? Well, of course, increase energy efficiency within the community, and or optimize energy management to integrate a greater share of renewable energy. So here you see this topic is cross-cutting between the two definitions we had of renewable energy and the electricity market design. Of course, this renewable energy sources could be, I mean, this renewable energy could be locally produced or from the grid. So this is again up to your creativity. What do we expect from a proposal submitted under this topic? Well, the ultimate goal should be to first identify and address, and I focus actually on address, the regulatory barriers and the contractual conditions that cooperative or collective actions might encounter. Why do I stress address? Because of course we would like the project to be as implementable and concrete as possible. So we would be encouraging you to actually dedicate less time to the identification of the barriers, actually build on existing research or existing projects. And of course, to take into account the differences between the type of energy community that you will be using. So for example, for a consumer purchase group, the key barrier could be technology providers, whilst for others could be, for example, contracts with utilities or operators. So the barriers that you identify should be, of course, specific to the type of energy community you are proposing. And of course, we would expect that at the end of the project, the action actually demonstrates the financial viability of the solutions proposed and the services, meaning through your project, you actually prove that collective actions do actually have the potential to to have a group of active consumers on the territories you're working on. You could, this is what we would firstly expect. A small addendum to this is that you could also take into consideration split incentives, for example, with the involvement of tenants, and explore different business approaches, for example, by using IT tools and technologies, such as blockchain transactions and digital platforms. Some reference to the impacts, of course, for those of you who actually used to submitting a proposal, you know that this is something the evaluators do take into account. I would like to highlight that we would expect the involvement of at least 5,000 consumers per million euro of EU funding, where by involvement, of course, we mean an activity which goes beyond the mere communication and dissemination activity with consumers. So we would expect these consumers to be actually part of the community you're creating in your project. Of course, you should also outline which would be the primary energy savings that are triggered by your proposal, and the investments triggered in sustainable energy, which could include renewable energy, depending on the proposal you would be developing. How to measure, how to quantify the reduction of regulatory barriers and improving on contractual conditions? Well, in the past, we did use a system of, for example, policy citations, whereby we would ask you, for example, to say how many policies locally and nationally would be influenced directly by your project. This could be actually, this you could also prove, for example, by showing the involvement of the specific stakeholders that actually could do something to solve the regulatory barrier that you're looking to address. So on this, we're actually very open, provided that, of course, you actually show concretely how you would be able to prove that a certain regulatory barrier or contractual barrier was solved. Some of the lessons learned from past projects. Well, you have enough time to build a strong consortium with relevant stakeholders. So what we said before, of course, try to have as much as possible a balanced consortium with all the key stakeholders on board. Go beyond business as usual, meaning, of course, in some regions, you might have energy communities already up and running, or collective purchase groups, or cooperatives. Well, we would expect you to actually go the extra mile and actually show which is this extra mile you would go. For those regions where actually this is a brand new concept, of course, we expect you to import that best practice there. Consider the European added value of your action. I mean, this is European funding, so we would not be looking for national actions to be funded here, nor a mere sum of national or regions actions. So we would really expect a European or added value being created by your proposal, which goes beyond the sum of the local solutions. Think about your project legacy from the start. So in the impacts, you will be actually explaining what is the impacts that your project will be triggering, meaning the impacts that will be generated after the life of the project. So this is why we would expect you, for us, to be able to properly address those impacts, to say what is the plan after the project. So how do we expect those impacts to actually happen? Which is linked to the credibility and the calculations that you make when you define your impacts. And of course, it is important to have a clear link between the impacts and the proposed work packages and tasks. And the final point on building on existing projects. It is true that this is a very new topic for which we do not have many existing EU projects funded. However, there are a few that I think you could use as a guidance. And of course, I think it's very important not to forget that you can build on existing locally, on existing local and national projects, or from elsewhere. So do not hesitate to actually use those data, that research, those experiences, and bring them into your project. For example, so here we have some projects. I mean, ResCoop 2020 and Smart Reflex come from IEE. They deal with district heating, renewable energy. Others are funded under us in 2020, and they deal with cooperatives, with consumer purchase groups, and how to mobilize finance. So I think there you can find interesting insights from where to start. And this is actually my last slide. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Oronzo, for the presentation. Indeed, here there are some European projects, but please, there are many, many local initiatives all around Europe on the issue of energy communities and cooperatives. So we don't expect that you only based your proposal on these, because you will be going beyond the state of the art, but that you look into all the initiatives that we have all around Europe. Just for clarification, just one clarification, Oronzo was mentioning the target of at least 5,000 consumers for 1 million EU funding. If you look at the text of the work program, what it's written is there are a list of impacts that we propose, but of course they are, according to the work program, depending on the scope of the activities that you proposed and whenever possible. So this 5,000 consumers involved per million of euro funding might make more sense, but for example, when you launch collective procurement, but maybe for other type of cooperative and community action, you will expect to have less number of consumers involved. So this is, of course, depending on the scope of you are proposing, and whenever possible, we will, of course, will ask you to have as many as quantified indicators as possible. Thank you. So